still recall, and hummed that recent tune that was so popular. If you recall, I know I heard some of you still kind of tapping along when I came in. But that recent new popular song that says, "There are no true or false ideas, only dominant and submissive ones." You can go ahead and hum along with that, since most of you have at least two brains. And with your other one, you could try and let us segue our way into several Kyroots that were read last time at the same time that the idea of the dominant and the submissive. I wasn't really planning to cover much more back up to that specifically, but I can't resist holding up my finger. All right. Now, no, let me say one thing. That after all that we talked about last time, did everybody get one quite clear, distinct on your own? I'm putting it as plainly as possible. Forgetting all sense of morality, forgetting any question of morality. There's no talk about good and evil. We're not discussing that. We're discussing the energy behind it. We're discussing, in fact, the questions of why men cannot, on some great wholesale level, come to any agreement. Forgetting the idea that we got different religions, you got wrong. You've got to be able to, in some way, smell at least a very interesting, unexamined question. Not, at least, not properly examined. Not why we have so many religions. You got bad religions, and you got good senses of morality, and you got other people that do not. Behind all that, not the specifics, but why are things that way? All the way from that into areas of even science, which I was going to try and hit a little more in a different way tonight, but all the way from what would seem to be the softer, more ephemeral questions about good and evil into the ideas of true and false, true and correct ideas and theories and etc., which are all reflections of the same background. Now they seem otherwise. It would seem to a scientist. It might seem to just an average, sophisticated, contemporary person that questions about whether something is true or false, mathematically, astronomically, are far removed from a matter of whether it is proper to have sex outside of the marriage institution. They would say, well, look, that's another area. But it is not, because it is all based on polarized energy in a three-dimensional context. And I fully understand we're not going to change that. There's nothing wrong. And so we all fully understand that to anybody, they do not have to be a professional scientist or they do not have to be a member of the clergy. Just the average mind would agree, they would say, that there is some great distinct difference between questions of morality, good and evil, and questions of a more scientific, factual bent of whether something is true or false. But it's not. The energy behind it is the same. And the energy behind it is, what I was saying, I was only going to hold up one finger just for a second, is not. The energy behind it, and why these questions can't be answered, is because it's not a matter of whether on this end that something is good or evil, or whether on a further end that would seem to be less of a social disease, question, that whether something is true or false, factual or incorrect. It's not that. It's that at any given time, due to the needs of life, due to whatever the circumstances, which are not of any importance, it's a matter that in any polarized situation, one of the ideas, that is, one of the forces, will dominate. If it did not, nothing would happen. We would die. At any given time, your inhalations are overcoming your desire to exhale. Either that or you are, well, that person did just die, or else you're about to die. One of them has to be submissive, to decide to lean down while you're talking and being cool, and to lean down on a hot plate at a party. You have to have a dominant idea, such as, I think I'll move my hand. There has to be, at any time, for anything to work, it is simply that. And if I went into a more tangible, physical area of mechanics, surely I've done enough about breathing, moving your hand. You can say, well, yeah. You got to be reasonable. You got to do enough to look after yourself. Right. Life's looking after itself. But in areas that would seem to be truly intellectual, spiritual, emotional, that is, non-tangible, non-physical, the mind says, Not that life had anything to do with you thinking this, of course not. The human intellect says, well, wait a minute. There is a difference between saying, well, a dominant idea, if you got your hand on a hot plate, you're correct. You should suddenly have a dominating idea. You're saying that there are two possible ideas. Well, there are two possible things to do. In any given situation, you're leaning on a hot plate. Now, you can continue to lean or you're not lean, right? I mean, there's nothing else worthwhile to say. That's the two possibilities in that one little piece of reality that we jump into this guy's life, and he's leaning on a hot plate. So we will assume it is an occurrence worthy of getting his central attention, that he is aware that he has leaned on a hot plate. He has two possibilities. He can stay there and go ahead and talk and try to act suave and debonair. Or, of course, he can still try and uphold this certain kind of sophistication while trying to pull his slowly burning, melting flesh off of this and act rather nonchalant. How do you mispronounce nonchalant? At any rate, you can either stay there or move it. And so even ordinary people, let's say, would go, yes, all right, yes, yes, yes. If you want to call one of the ideas dominant, yes. That you can look at from muscle contractions. That's what I meant by mechanics, really. I was inferring I wasn't going much further into. There's got to be a dominant idea to make a gesture, to stand up. There has to be a dominating idea. There has to be a dominating force in your muscular structure at that time. Or else if your dominating idea, non-verbally, is, screw standing up, I'll collapse. That would be the dominating muscular idea. But the mind would say, wait a minute, you're not going to drag this any further. There's nowhere to drag it. This is not separate. It just seems to be. By whose definition? By your muscles? Well, no. Did your thighs ever say, boy, I sure do wish I was a brain? Did your liver ever try and pull you into any discussion regarding the great mind-body dichotomy? Has anybody ever noticed? There's only one organ in your body that ever has brought up the subject of the great mind-body split. The great question between genetics and environment, between nature and nurture. It's not your spleen, it's not your ankles, it's not your fingers, it's not your hair, it's not your nose. It's not even, in most cases, your duodenum, if you do have duo. It is the brain, if that doesn't give you any possible hint. But the brain would say, all right, we can understand. I don't know whether some people's brain like to speak in that royal we, but of course maybe it's a French brain for all I know. Or it could be a brain that had to go to the bathroom. But the brain says, I can understand you calling a dominant idea like muscular. If you want to call it a dominant idea as opposed to a submissive idea, I'll go along with that. But up here we're talking about something else, but you're not. It is simply that any given time, and I'm fixing to get off my finger, just one point. At any given time in the world of man, no matter what context in which it is presented, religious, social, sexual, economic, anywhere in the secondary world of man, an idea, if it's called good as opposed to evil, proper is improper, correct as opposed to false, it is still one thing. It is that one of the ideas of two possibilities, and there are always two, but now I shouldn't have to even raise my voice. You know that there's always two possibilities. There's no such thing as one idea in any field. Because no matter what the idea is, if the idea, according to you and all of the people in your kingdom, that the one idea you have is correct, there's still two ideas. Well, sure, the wrong one, it ain't worth thinking about. Okay, it's not worth thinking about. Because if you are Rudolph Valentino, and you're that big a star, you don't care who you're dancing with. Bring me over, as sexist as he was, bring me over any kind of heifer and put her in a dress as long as she'll dance backwards and not mess with me. Put the spotlight on me. Every idea is in some way dominant. Not true, not false. That is a civilized secondary operation. But what is occurring is that one of the ideas in any situation is dominating its apparent polarized opposite. And it normally goes by such names. When it's dancing forward, is not Rudolph. It's normally called such intriguing names as the truth. It's called correct. It is called proper. It is called good. And the idea is that this apparent opposite, that the one that is dancing backwards, the one that is now submissive, is normally not called submissive. It is called error. It is called false. It is called improper. It is called evil. And that's it. Now we'll finally segue into a couple of Kyroots, as much time as we have from last time, that I'll be them absolutely disconnected. It doesn't matter. One was, if you recall, it went that in a factual version of a polarized reality, you can prove anything. Could I take one split or 2 split seconds for those who might be just tuning in and say this has nothing to do with any kind of obtuse apology for the human sense of reason or for language. It is not having to do with any sort of situation ethics. It has nothing to do with the relative value of words, wherein propaganda is a use of words that can twist and make words mean anything they want to, and double speak, and Big Brother is not watching you, Big Brother is whispering to you. It's not all that. That is, ordinary people can say, well, wait a minute, a fast talker, a man with a glib tongue, can prove anything. Just watch The Music Man next time they show it on TV. That's not it. It is not that some particular person somewhere with a sense of intrigue, with an intent to beguile and mislead other people. Nay, nay, my friends. Not in River City. It'll never happen. It's this, that in a polarized world, when you're dealing with the factual version of reality, the secondary world of man, the intellectual world of man, but a factual version of a polarized world, you can prove anything. The ordinary intellect would want to say, well, you cannot. You cannot prove that 2 and 2 is 5. See, here, unless you're wearing your Michelin frontal lobes, it gets slick. I'll admit. You can prove anything. You can prove that 2 and 2 is not 5. Well, I see that we're not dealing with radio brains tonight. We'll go on. I can do it another way. Any idea, any theory, any apparent evidence that was, for instance, once untrue, circumstances require any idea, theory, proof. When circumstances demand it, what was previously untrue can be made to, can become otherwise. Now, without a kind of subversive analysis, and unnecessarily analysis of this, the ordinary intellect would think about the history of man, the progress of man intellectually, as being a kind of movement wherein man continues to more and more drag out, ferret out, reason out the truth. That one way to look upon the history of man, all the way from morals, questions of morals, to questions of science, is that it has been a kind of progression from lesser truth, or more ignorance, to lesser and lesser amounts of ignorance. That ideas we've had, the great classic, if it was ever true, that the whole world at one time thought that the world, all of humanity thought the world was flat. Let's just use that since they still like to bang that one about. And now you would chuckle and say, ha ha. That there you could say, if you're ordinary intellect, there is a primo example of at one time when the best minds of their day, the accepted wisdom was that the world was flat. But now we have progressed through all sorts of things. That it started, you could historically, I'm sure, pick out and say that it even started before physical explorations, circa Leif Erikson or Columbus or the little monks in their little monk kayaks that some way that theoretically you had Greeks and Romans thinking, observing shadows, the movements of the heavens and the curvature of the horizon, that you had people already guessing, theorizing that the world can't be absolutely flat. And then through that kind of progress of the human mind, then even the progress of the human spirit, of people saying, I don't care if I fall off the end of the earth. Hell, I got 3 wives now. Who cares? I'll sail off. Give me a ship. And their spirit of adventure took over. And so you could say, from the ordinary view, that there has been a kind of movement from areas of a sort of an intellectual twilight. They even refer to it in the West history, they used to, as the Dark Ages. They're even now trying to rehabilitate that. The Middle Ages. But that man, there's been a kind of progress from lesser insights and intelligence and facts and knowledge to greater and greater areas. That what was once thought to be true, such as the world is flat, we now understand was not true. So there's been a kind of progress. Can we slip again? Maybe you got some snow chains if you don't have your Michelins. Now, I apparently have just made a good case using the facts as they are out in life. But notice, what I tried to bring up 2 or 3 minutes ago that you kind of you drew kind of a blank. You have now bought the story. Because look at it, that's not a kind of progress. It's simply a reversal. I mean, it's obviously progress, right? I mean, how stupid. Because most of you, I bet, have been out of town. Maybe been on planes, boat trips. World is flat. Obviously untrue now. We have progressed beyond that. What kind of progress is that? It was simply that. At one time, we'll accept that they say that many people, conventional wisdom said the world was flat at one time. Humans said that. What kind of progress is that? They said, this idea, the world is flat, is true. And here we are, 2,000 or 3,000 years later. You turned it over. Aha, now we're getting somewhere. Out in the world, yeah. But where are you getting here? What has happened? Now back to the Kyroot. It's not playing with words. That in a factual version of a polarized reality, you can prove anything. I'm going to have to ask the rhetorical question again. You don't find that interesting yet from tonight already? I'll sort of repeat one more time. I'm not sure what profit would be to try to drive you further tonight with it. I'll admit it's tricky to even try to give you the setup for this because it is not built in, as always, but very specifically here, is not built in even the beginning step of any context or ordinary intellect to think about this. Because, as always, it's not an attack the way things are going. If any of us plan to take another trip, then we'll all be glad that humanity now says that the world is not flat. It just makes travel a lot easier if you're going out of town. That's it. So there's nothing wrong. And so let's say that's progress. But as always, you should remember that unless you're going to be in for a lifetime of higher nervous system irritation, as per Kyroot tonight, you need to first realize that man's secondary reality is composed of rubber. In other words, you should have no complaint. We were going through that last time. They now say the world is round. Hey, I'll join the parade if I had anything else to do. If next week they say it's flat, and I'm talking about everybody out there that says it's flat, don't go out and say, wait a minute, I'm still a round worlder. Don't do that. Not unless you're trying to start some kind of kook club. Whatever they say it is in the factual world. That's all it is. But now notice, what seems to be a kind of progress, and I repeat, we're not questioning the progress, but what seems to be a movement in the human intellect individually, but let's look at it more on a mass kind of institutional level of civilization, that it went from an obvious, a blatant, incorrect idea, to it, the world is flat, to the truth. I mean, and it took thousands of years, according to crude history, for humanity as a whole to get to that place. But now think about it. What kind of progress is that? Now, you get away from ordinary definitions. We already accepted that's progress. They say that's progress, that's progress. But what is this? What kind of refinements, what kind of great major breakthrough has gone into that? They took one idea and reversed the motherfucker. That's it. It worked. But how are you going to call? Wait a minute. It only took to, again, take crude cartoon versions, which are not necessarily incorrect, of this progress. The way they used to teach history is they can find people back 600 years BC, written records of a guy here and there theorizing that I'm not so sure the world is flat after all. And his contemporaries chuckled. I can't do a good imitation of Greeks chuckling, but imagine they chuckled at the man. And then you can look at it real quick as this progress that we have gone 500, 600 BC. Trump, Trump, Trump. Guys fighting. Galileo, Copernicus, the rest of them cats. Trying to show that, wait a minute, things are not as flat as they seem. And it marched. And people are burned. People are persecuted. And still life goes on. And then finally here we reach, let's say, at least by the time Columbus got back, and at least he made the Western world, he convinced those people. He came back and he said, I sailed out. You remember, I went out of sight. And I went, yeah, we remember that. We thought you were a goner. And he's back. So it only took what? From 600 BC to 1500 AD. For them to refine it, for them to think about it. And we'll assume Columbus wasn't the first one. Probably a guy here and there sailed out over the horizon. He came back and he tried to tell everybody there in Spain or Africa or Portugal. And they went, one guy. But still, little bits and pieces. So look at it. We're talking about 2,000 years of progress. Refining this. But again, I ask you, do you see what the intellectual progress was? They took the idea. And I say they were talking about the polarized workings of energy, not excluding the intellect in a three-dimensional context. This 2,000 years of slow fits and starts. I'm glad I don't have a speech impediment like the guy with the seersucker suit. Fits and starts. A little forward, a little backwards. Fights, discussions that we have gone. It only took 2,000 years from the world is flat to the world is not flat. Think about the subtle refinements. Do you hear me? Are you beginning to catch on? Of course, an ordinary person couldn't. If an ordinary person was listening to this and would even tolerate it this long, they'd think, well, what kind of smart aleck attack? The words make sense. They could attack this and say, well, you're nothing but just a smart ass. I mean, this is just some kind of attack. I don't know. It's hard to tell on what. For those of you who didn't really like the best Kyroot of the night, did not actually finish up the night, but I can't resist going back for a second, is that guy who wrote in and said that watching this show was a singular, well, he said it was truly a unique experience, the way he put it. Truly unique. I'm assuming that he too was aware of the fact that people have really battered that poor little child with the word unique. But he said truly unique was watching this show because the unique experience from his view, because not only did he not understand it, he still didn't like it. And Kyroot had to add, if you recall, he weakened and added that, friends, that's some serious uniqueness. Because it is. Think about it. No, that is not the way life works, which is not unrelated to what the position we're in right now. That is what we were talking about. Who in the city, who in the secondary world, when they didn't understand something, still, I'll leave it to you. The intellect, there's nowhere to put your finger in and to start, if you're trying to in some way reasonably, logically, win somebody over to this view. That's why I was saying if ordinary people just suddenly tune this in and even listen for 15 or 20 minutes to this, they go, well, I don't see any real purpose of this other than you're trying to make fun of history, you're trying to make fun of the Greeks, or you're trying to make fun of Columbus, or you're trying to make fun of humanity. No. But notice, in a factual version of this polarized world, you can prove anything. And I said that this was changing the subject. You know, I lied to you. We're still talking about it's a matter of dominant and submissive ideas. You can prove anything, and that's not an attack on the mind of man. It is an attack on logic. It's not an attack on anything. To begin to see how things work, you can't call it an attack. I hate to call it anything, but more than anything, it should be entertaining. Of course, if you want to be a little more serious, you could say interesting. You can prove anything. Not you, not logic, not faulty logic. Polarized energy. A dance team out there on the floor of life. It is not, the team is not going in the same direction forever. If it does, they're going to dance off the floor and we're all done for. Don't call for Noah. It's too late. Be with an Arthur Murray arc. No. The dance team, for it to move, it would turn into some kind of science fiction. I don't know what you people would call it. Some kind of, I guess, Star Trek phenomenon. If one idea did not dominate and could also be brought to a position of submissive vis-a-vis even its opposing idea or another one, but at least the opposing idea, its dance partner, if it did not, then the world would have started dancing. The three-dimensional world as you know it. Your great old gods of Jehovah in the Old Testament would have said whatever the word was that made everything go, and let's assume in this case the word would have been dance, mothers. That's two words. Dance! And life would have taken off. Adam and Eve, polarized energy, would have taken off, but it would not be doing dance steps. In some ways, when I was saying it would be some kind of special effects vis-a-vis Hollywood or television, here it would be the two forces, Adam and Eve, the dominant, the submissive idea, the partner, and they would in some way just kind of glided. There would be no movement, but they would gone like this and just glide out of sight. And as soon as they got out of sight, I hate to tell you, friends, you would have been out of sight. It'd all been over. It'd gone out of sight and nothing. In other words, no movement. There would be no reality actively. You could say there was a reality, which is what we were hitting several nights ago, that just polarized energy, just a binary situation, you could say, in a crude way, would be existence, but it would not be operational. The thing's got to move. Adam and Eve, the dancers, the tango dancers, the Apache dancers, have got to dance. And just sliding off over the horizon is not dancing. That is not functional life. That is not operational existence. So they got to dance. And to dance is Adam goes do-do-do, and then he dances backwards. That he read it all and he went, my God, I'm a young lady. He had to dance backwards, and then he dances this way, and then they dance the other way. It's not playing with words, it's just your mind just not equipped at any polarized level to see the importance, but it's back to this. 2,000 years of steady progress. The world is flat. No, but now we know, ha ha ha, turn that over. The world is not flat. Well, there's no doubt we have immensely added to the storehouse of operational knowledge. But notice you can prove anything. At city level, you can't prove anything because at any given time, one of the ideas in any particular situation has to dominate. Now, it could be as important as whether the world is flat or round, because that could affect commerce, health, all kinds of things. It could be so small as one guy turns to another guy and he says, don't ever talk to me that way again. And the guy says, I'll talk about you the way I want to. It could be so of such small interest that it does not make the history books, except to the participants it's of some interest. What you looking at? You talking to me? They're dancing. It is the same kind of discussion. Hey, the world's flat. You talking to me? It has to be able to move. And at the factual level, you can prove anything. But not on the basis of proving it's right. At the operational level, at city level it is. Because at any given time, whatever is of great interest, or whatever is of interest in the civilized factual world of man, is of some interest. And whatever is of interest has, of course it's always polarized, but it has some dominant idea. And I can keep chopping this down to smaller and smaller, or we can make it bigger and bigger. It's always there at any particular time, but it can change. And the smaller it is, the more it seems to have to do with the softness of human life, like in politics or just discussion between two people. The truth, as they call it, or the correct attitude, the proper thoughts, can change like that. Or it may take 2,000 years, apparently, on a wide institutional level for something to change, to grow, for it to become more truthful, for it to become more correct. And the human intellect can only see it in such a way that it is a kind of movement of progress. And it's not wrong, except for this. If your mind can get above the polarized flow, you can see that it's not necessarily a case of things actually in some way increasing, becoming more complex. It's not that that's not true. It's something else. Of them becoming more refined, there's more and more knowledge added, more and more unknowledge, ignorance extracted. Because look, again, the example. As important as it would seem to be, they went from what we now know to be a patently erroneous idea, a fact that the world is flat. And we know now that that's ridiculous. But you can prove anything, and you do not have to look. You don't have to theorize. You don't have to try and come up with some cockamamie idea. All you got to do is look at any idea that you can have, that humanity can have. And it's opposite. It's polarized opposite. And of course, you've got to be better than somebody whose feet are intractably glued to the dance floor for you to think, well, wait a minute, the ideas I have that are correct are correct. I mean, what's it going to accomplish for me to say, well, the ideas I have are correct, I should change them. I should take wrong ideas and adopt them. Is that what you're saying? What are you tuning in this show for? I mean, it's nude stock market forecasting on another channel, isn't there? Something more interesting than this. No, it's not saying do that. I repeat, out there in life, everything's just right. Don't fool with that. That's not it. You don't have to fool with that. Life is looking after that. It's that life is not looking after this kind of stuff with any great interest. I just got to tell you that. That's why so often you seem to get stuck with very teensy amounts of this happening in life, and from sometimes unexpected sources. But life is running other parades, and this is, it's not really even on the back burner. Just, it may not even be in the kitchen yet. We're not going to get past this Kyroot, so I'm going to stay here for a minute. You can prove anything factually, but the really slick part of it is that the whole Kyroot, the whole sentence of, in a factual version of a polarized world, you can prove anything, is not at all, some of you, I can look at you and tell that you're getting some glimpse of it, but it's not at all having to do with, well, wait a minute, you can prove that stuff that's true is true, or you're saying that if you were really some kind of hypester, that you could take stuff that's not true and prove it's true. It's not even, see, all that's still on the basis, wait a minute, I can prove you're wrong. That is somebody talking to what I'm saying. I can say, well, you talking to me? And they say, well, I can show you you're wrong. Hell, I can show me I'm wrong. Verbally, I've already done it for you. You can prove anything. That is the benefit. That's not the flaw. That is the power of a factual version. That is the power. It's the only power, is the point, in a three-dimensional context that's alive, because it's going to be run by polarized energy. The power of it is that it can prove anything. Not that it proves, oh, wait a minute, now we're getting somewhere because the truth is the truth. I mean, we have gotten somewhere. I'm speaking now for ordinary intelligence, to me. Don't laugh, says ordinary intelligence. We have come somewhere. Over 2,000 years, we have gone from a foolish belief that the world is flat into knowing it's not. We have gone somewhere. Right. But you can prove anything. At one time, according to them, they proved that the world was flat. But you can prove anything in the factual world. But it's not a flaw. It is the power. It is the life. It is the breath of a three-dimensional life being run by polarized energy. Because it's not a matter that something's true. That something is intractably, that something is irreversibly true. Because at one time, the world's flat. I could have gotten into other areas that would appear to be religious. They appear to be moralistic and all that. Same thing. That there are things that at one time, conventional, common wisdom in the city, the truth, they went into softer areas of morality and behavior. Things that were just absolutely accepted as being a fact. Revenge, an eye for an eye. Christianity and other religions now manage to cast, a certain kind of long-distance jaundice eye at the idea of an eye for an eye. That now we understand that that's in some way metaphorical. Hell, at one time it wasn't metaphorical. In certain parts of the planet, still, since time does not run in a unified manner, and time zones are still places where an eye for an eye. And it is correct. And they don't really need the Bible to depend on it, but they can use it or some other book. It's simply that is correct. That is as true as the world is round. That you seek revenge on blood, on harm to your kin. That blood revenge is not open to interpretation. The world is flat. You just simply do it. But now, in other time zones, let's assume that you are an ordinary sophisticated person, that's no longer true. I mean, we're talking about days of barbarianism. We're talking about the kinds of people that probably to you, if you were ordinary, you'd say, well, they're probably even further back in history some way than our progenitors who thought of the world as being a flat place. But to actually believe that the true way to behave as far as serious slight to your kin is to kill someone, or at least that you do return homicide for homicide, murder for murder. I mean, that's simply not true. I mean, it's not true. I'm not even religious, says an ordinary person perhaps. But they say we cannot have civilization survive on that basis. So if you want to call it true and false, since I'm not particularly religious, says ordinary person, I'm just saying that kind of blood revenge is intolerable. So if you want to call that bad morality, bad theory, I will agree to you. That we have progressed to the point that that's no longer true. What kind of progress is that? I mean, there's progress out there. Remember, we're agreeing to that. But look at the refinement. The 2,000 or 3,000 years of civilization, of weighing the options, considering our behavior, to go from, well, a blood ill to your family, blood insult deserves, in other words, an eye for an eye. But now, after 2,000, 3,000, 5,000 years, we're at the point now, turn it over to the judicial system. Or even to the point of, we should forgive. We'll let the gods straighten this out later. That's progress. You've gone from this. If somebody kills somebody in your family, you kill them. Well, that's not true. The world is not flat. The progress, 5,000 years, you reversed it. That's the beauty of it. That's the efficiency of it. But look at it another way that you've always considered as some kind of great march of progress. And I refer you back to where we started since we're out tape now. In a polarized version, a factual version of a polarized world, you can prove anything. Because eventually you must. You being humanity. Happy holidays, if indeed this is a holiday.